Hello, my most important friends. I tell this story as our RV crosses the Mexican border and enters Guatemala. The road gets steeper, dustier, and more densely wooded. But the landscape expands, not horizontally but emotionally. There's something about this place that makes me feel small, Walt says. I'm silent, because I feel the same way. We didn't stop in a big city. Instead, on the recommendation of a fellow driver we met at a rest stop in Oaxaca, we drove to a small village near Lake Atitlan, a place with reddish-brown mud houses nestled quietly on the mountainside, and clouds so low I could reach out and touch them. We parked near a school, not like the schools I taught at in my 40 years in the United States. This one had just 3 classrooms, a corrugated iron roof, and desks and chairs made from leftover planks. But the laughter was as loud as an ocean. The children here had no phones, no new shoes, but their eyes were brighter than anything I had ever seen in a modern classroom. A young teacher approached us. Her name was Nayeli. She greeted us in excellent English and invited us into the classroom. I sat down, and within minutes, I was surrounded by children as small as sparrows. One little girl touched my hair, then laughed, calling the group over to look. I thought my silver hair must be like magic wool to them, but then I noticed something. In the corner of the classroom, there was a boy who did not come near. He sat still, silent, his head bowed slightly. I walked over gently, and I saw he had no eyes, not covered or covered, no sockets, just smooth, soft skin as if he had been born and the world had forgotten about it. I didn't ask anything. I just sat next to him and put my hand on his. The boy touched my hand for a moment, then pulled it out, taking a lump of clay from his pocket. He began to mold slowly, meticulously, each line, each curve, each small groove. For 10 minutes, no one spoke. There was only the sound of the clay being squeezed, bent, twisted, and finally, a small statue. It was me. It was me, my wavy hair, my long chin, and my outstretched hand. He touched the face of the statue and smiled. The smile made me feel like I had just been reborn. I didn't cry. I wasn't allowed to cry in front of a child like that. I just bowed my head and whispered, "Thank you." Then the teacher Nayeli told me his name was Mateo. He lost both his parents in an accident in the mountains. He lived with his grandmother and went to school every day, even though his house was 4 kilometers away on a mountain road. He couldn't see, but he felt everything. And he made the statue with his hands, with his memory, with something that no one could teach him. I asked, "Who did you learn from?" Nayeli said, "Nobody." I said, "If someone lets me touch them, I'll see them." That afternoon, I sat with Mateo for over an hour. She made another one. It was Walt. Curly hair, square jaw, broad shoulders. She'd never seen him before. She only held his hand for 3 seconds, but the likeness was uncanny. When I got back to the car, I placed the 2 little statues by the bedside. Walt looked at them, then turned to me and said quietly, "This trippy is making me see again things I thought I understood all my life." I nodded. And I said to myself, we're not traveling to see more, we're traveling to see again. Things that have always been there, but we've forgotten how to see. That evening, as I prepared to record the video, I said just one sentence. If you're listening to this, and you think you're halfway through your life, think again. Because sometimes, all it takes is a little hand to hold yours, and you'll feel like you're starting over. I don't know if Mateo will ever make more statues, But I do know there are things you have carved into my heart, and they will stay there forever. If you've ever heard of a place that makes you want to stand still for a long time, not because the scenery is so majestic, but because something inside you suddenly becomes small and quiet, then Lake Atitlan is that place. We arrived early in the morning, when the lake was still covered in a thin layer of mist, and the 3 volcanoes in the distance seemed to be sleeping under a blanket of clouds. Walt turned off the engine and got out of the car without saying anything. Neither of us broke the silence, as if saying anything would break the sacredness that hung in the air. The locals said that the lake was once an ancient volcano that exploded thousands of years ago, creating a bottomless depth. At the bottom, according to an old woman we met at the market, were countless spirits who sang every morning when people floated their thin boats out into the water. The old lady, Yara, lived near the boat landing, sold small handmade cloth bags, and spoke enough English to tell a story. She asked me, "You lost someone?" I was a little startled. I didn't understand why she asked, but I nodded. "Yes." Then she handed me a small, round, cold stone. She said, "Throw this into the lake, they will hear you." I didn't know who they was, but I held on to the stone tightly. That afternoon, Walt and I got into a small wooden boat. The boatman was a young boy named Ixel with deep eyes and calloused hands. He didn't say much. He just rowed, steady, rhythmic, as if he knew every wave. When the boat reached the middle of the lake, he stopped. He looked at me. He nodded. I took the stone from my pocket and held it tightly in my hand. In that moment, I saw faces in my mind. My mother, my best friend who had died of cancer, and the baby I had lost to me years before. I didn't cry, I just whispered, "I'm sorry I forgot about our dream." Then I dropped the stone into the water. There was no loud noise, just a circle that spread out very slowly, very evenly, and then melted into the lake as if it had never existed. But I knew I had left something there. Walt didn't ask. He just held my hand, squeezed it gently, and I felt warmer. When the boat pulled back to shore, Yara was still sitting there, eyes closed, as if listening to a sound only she could hear. I handed her the unpaid burlap bag, and she shook her head and said, "No, it's for remembering." I didn't understand what she meant, but I took the bag home, put it next to the bed in the RV, and that night with the lights off, I touched it, and I felt strangely at peace. I think of those of you who are listening to this. Maybe you've lost someone too. Maybe you're still holding onto a dream for someone who's gone. And maybe you never got to say goodbye. If so, I just want to say this. Lake Atitlan is still there. And if you haven't been there yet, close your eyes. Imagine yourself standing in a small boat in the middle of the misty lake and drop a stone. Because somewhere at the bottom of the lake, there might be a soul waiting to hear your whisper. After Lake Atitlan, we turned southeast, where, as the villagers said, the earth still breathes. I didn't understand until I saw it, the Pakia volcano, standing like a silent sentinel in the thin ash sky. We weren't going to climb it. "I'm too old to climb," Walt said. I nodded. But the next morning, when I woke up, I found him lacing up his boots, his backpack ready. "Are you sure?" I asked. Walt looked at me, smiling a little. "I don't want to stand on the ground forever wondering what's up there." And so we set off on our first climb in our 70s. Our guide, Elias, was only 19, but he had been a local who had been guiding tourists up Pakia since he was 12. He didn't talk much, but there was something very old in his eyes. as if his childhood was buried under every layer of dry lava we walked over. The path wasn't easy. There were parts where the wind was so strong that it almost knocked me over, and parts where the ash was flying so high that all I could see was Walt's feet in front of me. But every time I tried to stop, I heard Elia's whisper behind me, "Just a little more. It's worth it." And I kept going. At the highest point that visitors were allowed, Elias stopped, then took out a bag of marshmallows and a long bamboo stick. I laughed when Walt raised his eyebrows in surprise. Toasting the marshmallows on a volcano? Elias laughed. Yes, everyone remembers this. He stuck the stick into a steaming fissure, and seconds later, the marshmallow began to melt. We shared a piece of the sweet treat in the ash. It sounded silly, but at the time, it was the best thing I'd ever eaten. Elias told me that he had a brother, a guide, who died while helping tourists escape a rock slide. He didn't leave the mountain. He became part of it, he said, looking off into the distance. I didn't ask any more questions, but in that look I saw something solid. As if from that day on, Elias wasn't just leading people up the mountain anymore. He was also leading his brother back, bit by bit. As I descended the mountain, my legs trembled, but my heart felt strangely calm. I told Walt, "We don't have to climb every peak, but sometimes, just touching a place where someone sacrificed, we understand what it means to live meaningfully." That evening, I opened my notebook and wrote a line. There are mountains that don't need to be conquered. Just bowing before them is enough. And I thought about the people who were listening. Maybe in your life, there is a place you were afraid to go, a memory, a loss, a dream left behind. I just want to say, when you are brave enough to step closer, you will no longer be the same person. You will know that you are living, not just existing. And that, perhaps, is why we are here.